Welcome to the December 28th episode of Reactive Consciousness, our in-depth podcast about what happened this week in our lives. I am your host, OldManStompy, and this is...
Lotus Prince.
And your friendly neighborhood Dracologist.
Yeah, amazing. We have a really different lineup this week. Much I'm sad to report that Vice couldn't be here. Very sad. So
yeah,
sad.
I was gonna say, I'll bet you are.
I'm incredibly sad.
Sad
But
is an
anyway, we have a sadness sequence beginning in 5.
Boo-hoo.
Sadness sequence not found.
Yeah, I was gonna say, and now for the actual podcast reprogramming.
So anyway, we have a couple of really interesting topics I'd like to talk about this week, that we'd like to talk about this week. Dracologist actually had something that he wanted to discuss with us that is of great interest to me personally. But first, I'd like to hijack this podcast to talk about wrestling, because that never happens.
Yes.
And I'd like to start with a discussion that...
Do you want to say that you want to body slam the podcast?
I would like to break this podcast in half.
You actually beat me to it. I was going to say, by God, he's taking over the podcast.
That podcast had a family.
Yes.
Yes, our sister podcast, Corrective Consciousness,
nicely done.
Which you should listen to and pay your respects.
Yeah, it's on every Tuesday. Press F to pay respects.
Please don't.
Press Alt F forward.
By the way, regarding press F to pay respects, I think my new favorite one of those is at the very beginning of the story sequence of Tekken 7. It flashes back to Tekken 1, back when, you know how the whole thing started because Kazuya was thrown off a cliff because Heihachi's father was an asshole. There's actually a part where it says, like, press X to throw Kazuya off cliff. It's like, wow. All right.
So when I watch streaming wrestling, you know, on the internet store, there's like a Twitch chat on the side, and like a meme in that Twitch chat is to come up with these like increasingly obscure and like dirty stories about Roman Reigns and about how he like ruins your sex life, and it always ends with like press F if you want Roman Reigns to like break down your door while you're intimate with your girlfriend and that kind of thing. It's like how did this start? Like, when did this become a thing? Do people like? I know people hate Roman Reigns, but why is like this how they express it?
That's kind of amazing.
I think I'm very sure that like having sex while having these guys just being in the neighborhood wrestling would be a big turn off. You just would hear the.
I would say it's not exactly mood music. I would say it's not Coldplay.
Yeah, you would hear two giant men having this big greasy wrestling time with giant grunts and these body slamming sounds.
Oh yeah,
indeed. But off the topic of sweaty men. So the big wrestling news this week that came out actually right as we were recording last week's podcast was the announcement of a new Women's Royal Rumble. So for those unfamiliar with the concept, the Royal Rumble is one of the biggest events of the WWF calendar. It's this like really fun event where they have a pool of 30 superstars. And you start with 2 in the ring, and roughly every 90 seconds, a new guy enters. And you lose, or you get eliminated by just getting thrown over the top rope, and the last man standing becomes the #1 contender to a title of his choice at WrestleMania. So it basically tells you what the storyline is going to be from January, when the Royal Rumble is held, through the spring season. WrestleMania is usually somewhere in April. So it's usually really exciting. They use the surprise of every 90 seconds to like bring back some stars who have been like on the shelf due to injury, or like to bring back some legends who are going to be appearing for WrestleMania season. Like last year, they brought back Goldberg. They brought him back before that, but he also showed up in the Royal Rumble. Even though he didn't win, it was one of the highlights to have Goldberg and Brock Lesnar and The Undertaker.
I haven't seen Goldberg since Santa's sleigh.
You made that same joke when I talked about this last January.
I probably did.
This is the point where I wish I would know something more about this, folks.
So Goldberg was like one of the big monsters of the Attitude Era. He was notorious. He wasn't a very good wrestler. But he was originally a real training squad NFL football player. He obviously didn't make it into the NFL.
I do want to anytime I hear the word Goldberg, I constantly mix it up with Gold Dust. The guy.
Those are not the same at all.
Yes, and this is why I'm trying. Okay, brain, work with me. This is not the same.
So yeah, Goldberg was this guy who had like 176-0 or something, like winning streak in WCW.
Jeez.
He was like the first like big undefeated monster. He was the guy who basically took the title off of Hulk Hogan, and was supposed to be the heir apparent to Hulk Hogan's title as like the top wrestler in WCW.
Nice.
And Goldust was like his gimmick was that he was an effeminate Hollywood heel. He was like that generation's Gorgeous George. He was like very sexually transgressive, and he would hit on all the male wrestlers and touch them in odd places while he was wrestling. So they are not the same person at all.
So fitted well into that wrestling thing.
Yeah, he fit. I mean, Goldust was great for what he was at the time. He was a fascinating character. Although, so his finishing, one of his finishing moves is called Shattered Dreams, and it was basically a kick to the groin. And,
that's pretty good.
His gimmick was that his movie production company was also called Shattered Dreams Productions, and there was this incredible fuck you moment to the WWF fans when they got behind Daniel Bryan, who was like one of the big emergent like fan favorite stars after John Cena got really big. I think it was 3 years ago at this point. He entered the Royal Rumble, and people were like, oh man, I really want Daniel Bryan to win so that he can challenge for the title at WrestleMania. And he lost, like, really early on in the match, and then immediately after he lost, Goldust came out in his 90-second interval. So Daniel Bryan is, like, sitting on the floor while the crowd is booing, and this big thing that says Shattered Dreams shows up on the Titantron, like, over his head. And like, there's no way that wasn't deliberate.
Ouch.
That's great.
So, yeah. So
you don't know what hurts more, your shattered ass bone or your shattered dreams.
Yeah, so it's really it's a variant of one of those moves that's like definitely a heel move because it's barely legal. It's called an atomic drop, where you're supposed to be taking the impact on your tailbone. You just get like dropped on your crotch on the guy's knee, and like in principle you're hitting the tailbone, but really it's a low blow because the low blows are supposed to be illegal in wrestling.
I mean, be that as it may, taking a hit on your tailbone is like that's horrible anyway.
Yeah, well, that's why it's a.
When I was a young kid, someone kicked me in the tailbone so hard I couldn't sit down. The kid was
like that. That's a Yakuza heat action. Is like sitting somebody down on their tailbone, and it looks terrible.
Well, it's probably called the atomic drop because I'm sure at some point it was a very impactful move. It's not really like part of anybody's repertoire right now, but like it was supposed to be taken pretty seriously.
I think it's still a better thing than a sleeper suplex.
Yeah, well, I mean, even suplexes. Suples, as they're sometimes called
suples, yeah.
There is like a classic wrestling announcer from the 80s who called them suples.
No, I actually remember the internet reviewer, the Spoony one, used to have a bunch of wrestling videos, and one of the things he did was, I think there was like a wrestling board game. It was one of those like VHS board games. And the announcer, I think that was the announcer, he's like, oh, when he hits it with a suplex! And like Spoony was like, okay, I'm going to look this up, because why is it called a suplex? So he actually did his research and everything, but it was kind of funny, because he was getting a bunch of different sources, and I remember one of them distinctly. Like, there was an Olympic gold medalist wrestler who called them suplex, and Spoonie's like, well, if a gold medalist wrestler calls them suplex, then they're suplex. But at the same time, though, like, when he was able to really look up the etymology of the thing, it was either basically somebody being pretentious or mistaken, and it should just be suplex.
It's kind of reminiscent of the word like forte, and I know we've had this discussion before that like the classic the word forte meaning strength as opposed to the word forte meaning like piano forte, like music played loud. Yeah. The classical pronunciation of that is fort, not forte.
Really?
Like it was never supposed to be pronounced forte. But people pronounce it forte because it makes them sound smart. Like anytime, or at least in American English, like putting an accent on a word tends to make people think you sound intellectual.
Oh, I didn't even know that. I thought it was supposed to be like I just thought that might have been, not that I looked it up, but I thought that it might have just been how it was supposed to be in like an Italian.
Yeah. Well, it's not it's not a loan word from the Italian. It was considered to be a highly vulgar and like a sign of like a faux intellectual.
Because usually when I picture like I usually thought that American accents usually like interfered with the intended meaning. Like the city Los Angeles. Like shouldn't it be Los Angeles?
And St. Louis.
Yeah, and even oh no, what was it? There was some. Yeah, like in Texas is Houston, but New York has a street called Houston, and like they can't both be right.
Well, I mean, language evolves.
Yeah, I know, but it's just little things like that.
I'm
just
curious, like if the word suplex is of French of origin, then it's souffle. Then it's it fits because French pronounce things a little bit
Right.
like they melt a lot of vowels and stuff.
Don't-
Now, if you'll
don't-
excuse
don't
me,
I-
I'm going to
don't
go
I
to
know
the kitchen and make myself a nice soufflex.
So the announcer, I believe Gordon Solly, I think that's his name. If he was a heel announcer, it makes a lot of sense because you kind of want to come across as pretentious. But if sometimes some announcers just use that affectation because it sounds like melodious, you know,
Sure.
it adds some color to the action. I like
Yeah.
a nice accent. It really brings the room together.
It really ties the room together.
So the main thing I want to talk about again was the announcement of the Women's Royal Rumble. So what happened like earlier this year was they ran a tournament on the WWE Network called the Mae Young Classic, and they had these tryouts all around the world for women's wrestlers. The WWF, since like the mid '90s, has never really taken their women's division all that seriously. Like there was a point where they hired like some of the best wrestlers ever, not just like men's or women's, but some of the best wrestlers in the history of wrestling from All Japan Pro Wrestling to be part of the WWF Women's Division, and they outshone some of the men, so they got fired for making the men look bad.
Wow.
Like, this is actually pretty common. Like since then, it's been a thing that like women have been talked down to in the back because if they wrestle too well, it makes the men look bad. Like that's just the consequence of working in a business where it's run by a bunch of like old white guys from North Carolina or thereabouts. You know, like that's just a fact of life, like working in the WWF, and it's extremely unfortunate.
I would imagine the women are far more agile in the ring. Like the man puts in the meat, the woman puts in the moves.
Yeah, right. Like the style, and this is actually an important point that I was going to try to get to. That like part of what they've been trying to do is equalize things a little bit. And some of the kinks that have come up is that the women just work a different style than the men do. They for the most part, like the men are mostly used to working with other guys who are around like 200 pounds, more or less, 200 to 250, with a possible exception of like the Big Show and like some of the smaller cruiserweights. But for the most part, these guys are all like between 200 and 300 pounds, whereas the women are all between like 100 and 150. So like what you can do and how strong you are and the kinds of moves you can pull off, like some of the flippy stuff that they do against each other really rely on the person that you're working with being a good base for you, meaning that they have to be a lot heavier than you, or at the very least a lot stronger. And so it's some of those moves like the women can't necessarily pull off. And even like in some of the promotions where they allow intergender matches, the women who wrestle in those divisions can't translate those skills to working with other women because they're so much lighter. So it does matter a lot.
Those intersexual, how do you went intergender?
Yeah, intergender matches. That's fine. So
nowadays the gender and sex is very very separate terms nowadays.
It's an important distinction because I believe a transgender wrestler just won a title in New Zealand, so it's worth like making the effort to make the connection.
Anyway, I do want to ask her that, like in that case, like this sort of cross match between a man and a woman would require almost a third type of set of skills from both of them.
Sometimes yes. I think really the women in that case work more of like a cruiserweight style. So like a lot of the women aren't that much lighter than someone like Rey Mysterio, or at least in some of his earlier days before he got really buff, like in his later years. For example, like the big rumor is that part of the reason they're having this match is that they've signed Ronda Rousey to a WWF contract.
And then she was going to go into wrestling.
Yeah, she's going to debut. She's going to debut at the Royal Rumble and probably become the title contender to one of the women's titles.
I was going to say she's going to attract quite the crowd.
Yeah, exactly. And
I know that, but she's more like she's more a knockout. She's not about grappling and throwing.
Well, I mean, she came from a judo background, right? And she was somewhat notorious, even if that isn't necessarily
when she
what
was
she was
in
best
MMA.
at.
She would always try to like get you to the ground. Like
she was the armbar, like that. Those were her like really famous finishes when she beat people in 15 seconds with an armbar.
Yeah, she actually like famously lost like her last, her big comeback. She famously lost to someone who was fighting more like. I mean, I'm not going to say boxing style, but it was more like punching style.
Yeah, she lost her title to an actual boxer, Holly Holm. I think.
Oh, it was boxing?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So
yeah, and she's more of a grappler.
Yeah. So like
is she?
Conor McGregor, I think, is the one who's more of a striker.
All right.
So yeah, Ronda Rousey is a little bit more of a grappler, and like she's already had a really famous moment where she got brought in WrestleMania 31 by The Rock to confront Triple H and Stephanie McMahon, and it was a big surprise because she was still under UFC contract. So no one knows how they managed to work that out without a massive lawsuit to use her character to promote WrestleMania. And like I remember Dana White was extremely upset about it, but then he got Brock Lesnar, so I guess he's not upset anymore.
Yeah.
But yeah, so in that sequence, she put Stephanie McMahon and she hip tossed Triple H. It's one of the rare instances of so it's mostly because of Mattel and their toy company contracts that the WWF doesn't do intersex or intergender matches anymore. So Ronda Rousey versus Triple H was one of the handful of times in the last like 10 years or so that they've actually had like a female combatant and a male combatant go head to head. It's pretty exciting. And then she put Stephanie in the armbar, and that was how the segment ended. That's how they got their comeuppance for that WrestleMania. That was their big segment. It's pretty cool. So yeah, like we've always known that she's a big wrestling fan, and it'll be interesting to see how she's reacted to, because I don't know if she comes out, if she's going to come out, if how the crowd's going to react. Like
that was actually kind of my concern, because like she was like everybody's favorite when she was in MMA. But after she lost, there was like she was absent for a long time because she was dealing with genuine like psychological effects of having lost. She had addressed that on, I think, the Ellen DeGeneres show. And after a long time, I forgot how long. Was it like a year or something? She finally came back, but then immediately or almost immediately was not literally knocked out, but was considered to have been KO'd. Like she was taken out of the match before it got too ugly, and everyone was kind of like, "Oh, well." Yeah. And this was the year that like she appeared on the MMA like PS4 game and everything, like right on the cover and everything.
Right.
The game came out like right before she like famoly lost that thing. So it's just
UFC
geez.
UFC 2, I believe, right?
It was UFC. Excuse me. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's an important question. Like, if the crowd doesn't receive her well, if she's supposed to be, so the WWF is sometimes notoriously tone deaf to like what kind of reaction a returning wrestler is going to receive. Like there are a lot of times they expect basically everybody who comes back unannounced or every surprise to be treated like a babyface. And that doesn't always happen. Sometimes the crowd just immediately turns on a surprise, especially if it's spoiled, like this Ronda Rousey thing is. So if especially if that local crowd, because the Rumble is usually in Philadelphia, which is a really rough crowd, as Vice can attest.
Yeah.
Like they might hate her, they might boo her out of the building, and how is she going to react to that? She is not a trained wrestler. Like
from what I've heard, people in Philly even like boo people they like.
Huh.
Yes. So like so Philadelphia is best known for booing Santa Claus at an NFL game.
Yeah, I've heard about that. That's kind of amazing.
Who was the Santa Claus?
I don't know. It was a nobody.
Just Santa Claus.
It wasn't anybody. It wasn't.
They booed Santa Claus.
Just a guy as Santa Claus at an Eagles game.
Oh. All right.
That's amazing, and I live like an hour from there.
It wasn't like Boomer Esiason or like a New York Giants player or something dressed as Santa Claus. No, it was just Santa Claus.
All right.
Yeah.
So I do want to sort of like if she gets on, like I hope she does well, and basically just if she is met with like this sort of this antagonistic, she have the fortitude to shrug it off.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the best thing would be if she takes that and just plays a heel, and that could be a great story unto itself.
Oh, that would be interesting.
Yeah, a lot, because the Authority, we know that she's being brought in for the sake of like WWF corporate attention, which means that she's chosen by the company, which is usually a heel role. And so, like, to go with audience expectations, she should play that character. Like if she's the most likely opponent for her will be Charlotte, Ric Flair's daughter, who's probably the most athletic of the main roster WWF women. And so they would probably have the highest quality match, assuming Charlotte's currently the champion on the blue brand. So she's quite likely to retain the title all the way to WrestleMania if she's the chosen opponent for Ronda Rousey. And she's a face right now. It's impossible for her not to be the face after Ric Flair was hospitalized for quite a long time earlier, unless she turned on her father, which would be incredibly poor taste. Not that I put it past them to do it.
They should have a Charlotte Flair impersonator advertise Georgia Gold.
Indeed.
I'm laughing because like in another podcast I heard like Ric Flair, a man whose every bone is pulverized after every match.
Yeah, well, Ric Flair is also notorious for cutting his blading for like bleeding during every match, and so the joke for a long time was like the only reason that Ric Flair like doesn't bleed during a match anymore is because he's literally out of blood. And like since he looks like a zombie right now, like people would believe it too.
He's so old. Like someone mentioned, like he's so old. He's battled the Egyptians. He wrestled wrestled the pharaohs. He's literally a pillar man.
Yeah,
no, I'm pretty sure it was Matt Hardy who was Dance with Cleopatra.
No, he danced with Ric Flair too, like, right?
Oh.
And Cleopatra simultaneously.
There we go.
Woo!
He was on the Pyramid of Giza.
So, one of the, I can't remember who it was, but some like major YouTube star watched literally 10 hours of Matt Hardy laughing for charity. And like someone sent it to Matt, and like he did it, and someone sent the video to Matt, and he replied like surely this decade of hours that you have experienced will provide a phenomenal amount of insight. It was like
this decade of hours.
His choice of language is so incredible, and how does he come up with this stuff?
That's fantastic.
This is why this is the acting part of wrestling I really like.
Yeah, like so speaking of Matt Hardy, like they're airing all these vignettes, and I guess it's supposed to build up to a match against Bray Wyatt, but like who gives a shit about the wrestling? Like the least interesting part of Matt Hardy wrestling is the wrestling.
Yeah,
like,
I've never seen Matt Hardy wrestle, but those YouTube clips are fascinating.
He's not even a good wrestler. Like he actually has like some problem with his knees that he can barely even walk straight. It's part of how he wound up in a tag team in the first place. Like mostly it's just his character.
His character's
he should add that to his character that he has a limp.
Yeah, sure. I mean, he does. If you watch him walk, like if you watch the YouTube video, it's one of the most like watched WWF videos of his return at WrestleMania this year. You can see him kind of like it looks like he's walking bow-legged, and you can kind of believe like your first impression is that he's like that just because he's put like 25 years of wear and tear on his body, just wrestling. But no, he was born that way.
Huh.
And sucks. Like yeah, so like part of the reason he does well in a tag team is because like he and Jeff, it allows them to hide each other's weaknesses. That's usually why guys wind up in a tag team for a long period of time because they have something in their game that would be exposed if they were singles champions. In Jeff's case, it's his drug addiction, and which is unfortunate. Like in Matt's case, it's just that he's technically not that proficient. But yeah, I mean the match will still be good, I think, and I can like. The vignettes they're airing right now, they're not that exciting, and they don't really use all the characters. But I can appreciate that they might be like building to something over the next few years, the next like few months going into WrestleMania. But yeah, so like back to the Royal Rumble. Like one last comment I have is that they've tried something like this before, where they wanted to make a big announcement of something that they never did before for the women. To bring them even with the men, and that was the Hell in a Cell pay-per-view. So Hell in a Cell is a style of match where the match takes place in a totally enclosed cage, which of course always means that they break out of the cage and wind up like brawling all over the arena. Like in principle, it's supposed to be a cage that keeps you trapped with like some really heated rival. And a lot of the time, they just never paid that much attention to the women's storylines that would necessitate like that kind of gravity to a match that would require you to like literally cage two people in.
And the funny thing is, Ronda Rousey is like, that's where she's been fighting. He's always in like
literally a cage fighder.
Yeah.
Although the Octagon, I think it doesn't have a ceiling like the Hell in a Cell does.
Oh, okay. Well, then again, you're not supposed to be climbing anyway.
You're not supposed
You have more important things to worry about, like the fast person trying to beat the crap out of you.
Also, it's like I don't know. That cage is not like. Is it actually a metal bar cage, or is it something made from some sort of net?
Yeah, it's chain link, and sometimes part of it is breakaway.
So because the MMA fighters are fighting in this, the octagon is actually like, is it octagon?
Yeah, it's octagon.
In the UFC it's octagon. In other MMA, I think the octagon is actually trademarked, so other MMA promotions don't use the octagon.
Anyway, like for what I see, that those like the pylons are padded, and it has those sort of polymer sort of webbing between it, so it's not very hard. It's not a very hard substance.
Oh yeah, the WWF one is actually like chain link, and that's part of how they sell it. It's like some brutal structure that like they're supposed to slam each other into, but it's chain link, so it gives away a little bit. Just like
if it were actual bars, it'd be a freaking nightmare.
Yeah. So part of the point is that it also does a weapons match. It's no disqualification. So there's always like the bamboo sticks, the kendo sticks that they use, and the tables and the chairs, and those weapons always come into play. So the issue was that since Hell in a Cell is a pay-per-view, you know there's always going to be at least one Hell in a Cell match. And because they added the women's match to it, that meant that on that pay-per-view, there were 3 Hell in a Cell matches. So when you're trying to book 2 men's Hell in a Cell pay-per-view matches and 1 women's Hell in a Cell match, like they're all Hell in a Cell matches, and so you have these like 3 pairs of wrestlers who are all going to the booking agents and saying like, this is what I want to do. And those agents are all talking to each other and trying to keep these 3 matches, all of which use the same structure and more or less the same sets of weapons, like distinct from one another, to like have their own storyline. So they're all fighting over spots they can do, and the women just don't have access to the same library of spots the men do. Like the biggest example that I can think of is when they tried this match, they used these gimmick tables that the wrestlers are supposed to be able to fall through, and the women in the match were just too light to go through the table. So they tried to do that spot, and it didn't work. So it kind of it limited the whole pay-per-view because they reserved this like highlight spot for the women's match. That and originally, so Charlotte was involved in this, and one of her finishing moves is a somersault off the top rope called the moonsault, like one of her signature moves. And she was supposed to finish the match originally by doing a moonsault off the top rope through a table, and that would ensure, since you've got one woman coming down another one, they would have enough weight to break the table. But instead, they did a body slam, and her opponent Sasha Banks, she's one of the lightest women on the roster. She just like hit the table hard, and then she just had to roll off of it. Which is probably really painful for her, and I think shortly after that she messed up her shoulder. So I'm kind of curious if that. So
I did want to ask that. This is like women body slamming each other from pylons. It's like, Jesus Christ, that must be taxing on the breasts.
So actually, there was a I can't remember who had this, but there was a woman who had a finisher called the Implant Buster. It's like it is like a slam on the right on the chest.
Jeez.
So they've made a reference to this in WWF. They are not afraid to mention that. And
extreme mammogram. It's called the extreme mammogram.
So there's a funny story about this. There's 2 wrestlers, the Bella Twins, who when they came up, they used this tried and true heel maneuver called twin magic that lots of twin wrestlers have tried in the past, where like one of them will start, and then when the referee isn't paying attention, the other one will switch places. So the face is like now wrestling a fresh like opponent, and they use this all the time. But the Bella Twins, they took some time off from WWF, and when they came back, only one of them got like really big breast implants. So it was incredibly obvious now, like which one of them was who, and they still tried the twin magic thing, and the first couple of times the referee just didn't pay any attention to it. And I was like, how stupid do you think the audience is that they thought? And so eventually they started playing off of it. So like the other one started coming out with like padded bras, and she would show off to confuse the referee. Like she would pull the padding out. Like what the hell are you doing in the ring? You're not supposed to be here. So yeah.
Funny.
Yeah, I guess.
I guess.
I guess. So generally speaking, I'm tentatively excited for the upcoming Women's Royal Rumble. I think if they give it the time that it deserves, and they actually do at least 60 seconds between the 30 entrants, like part of the point was they didn't announce this, but they very abruptly signed like a whole bunch of wrestlers from the independent leagues, and they brought like 6 women up to the main roster with no warning whatsoever after Survivor Series. So all of a sudden there were like way more women on the roster that we expected the writers knew what to do with. So there must have been something up, and like the storylines weren't even that interesting. So like, what are all these people doing? And it turns out they're here to like fill up the field for a Women's Royal Rumble, and now it makes like a lot more sense. So I'm hoping they get the 30 entrants. I'm hoping they take it almost as seriously as the men's match, because the last thing that the women's wrestling division needs is to be like shown to be like exclusively inferior to the men's division. Like what's been shown time and time again is that the work that the WWF has been doing promoting the women's division has been paying off, and they've been seeing rating increases in segments where their high-profile women's title matches have been shown on Raw. Like, they've been seeing hour-by-hour increases when they advertise a match between some of their highly promoted women's wrestlers, even if it comes across as kind of forced, because it's obvious that they're not built up yet as high as the men are, and they're not as talented, and they don't have as many like superstars as the men do, and they don't have household names like John Cena or Brock Lesnar. But it's paying off in ratings, it's paying off in merchandise sales, and I hope they commit to it. Like we talked about this last week with Matt Hardy, the most important thing is to commit to your character. And like the fans can't get behind a wrestler if the company isn't behind them.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So I'm sure. So the Royal Rumble is in about a month. I think it's January 28th. And the field has yet to be completely filled up. The announcement was just this past Monday of the women's match, and I think only the first men's wrestlers are like exposing the fact that they're going to enter into the men's match. So usually they make a whole big deal about drawing the number. Usually there's some storyline about who gets number one, because that person is usually in a feud with the Authority in some way, and like usually there's a match to see who comes out at number 30, because you would imagine that's the most desirable position. So we've got a month of storylines, and it is actually one of my favorite matches, just because like it's one of the only times where you have a coherent match with that many wrestlers in it. Like a lot of the time, I know you've seen that video of the 41-man Royal Rumble at SmackDown.
Yeah, that was amazing.
There's so many people in the ring that you cannot make heads or tails of it. It makes no sense whatsoever.
Yeah, like it's just
Black
like,
Friday of
it kind of is.
So there actually was a Black Friday style match. They called it a reverse battle royal. And you think like, what the hell is a reverse battle royal? It's like the point apparently is, instead of like trying to throw your opponent over the rope to get eliminated, the goal is like all these wrestlers like run towards the ring and they try to get into the ring, and like the first like 20 guys who get in the ring get to be in the match, and then they have a regular battle royal.
That's crazy.
And so it's like they tried to have the reverse part of the match where guys are fighting outside the ring. It's like, why are you wasting your fucking time? There's people jumping in the ring and you're gonna lose your spot. Like,
yeah,
like there's no way to make that match and have it actually make sense unless like somebody's suffering from an injury and the whole drama is that like he's trying to get to the ring while 19 other guys are trying to run ahead of him. And
fly, you fools.
Well, it was it's like the laziest kind of idea. Like let's take an idea that works, and what if we did it backwards on opposite day?
Yeah.
Like, I would imagine like everyone starts and everyone trying to throw the others into the ring.
Yeah, that'd be way funnier if they were like wrestling outside and you lose if you wind up in the ring. But no, like that's all that it would have taken to make it more entertaining, because they could have fought in the crowd, they could have fought all over, they could have fought backstage, like people could have been dragged out of their locker rooms, there could have been all kinds of humor. But no, they just ran to the fucking ring and then they fought out there like idiots, and then they got in the ring.
Actually,
I'm just imagining some random guy from the audience getting thrown in the ring, but wait, he was a wrestler all along.
Yeah, sometimes they do that. There was a joke wrestler named Santino Marella, and like he got they've done this like plants in the crowd. They plant wrestlers in the crowd when they're planning on debuting them, and they're not like a well-known face from the developmental league. They brought this guy Marella in, and they had him like wrestle a joke match against the current Intercontinental Champion, and he won with like assistance from Vince McMahon. And like, I'm sure people who like pay attention online knew that this guy was a real wrestler. I think he ran a dojo, like a judo dojo in Canada, so he was not like a totally unknown entity. And there was probably word that he got signed by WWF. But like they pulled that before, just like pick a random Joe from the crowd. This guy like looks way more muscular than like 99.9% of wrestling fans, so he's pretty obviously not just a random fan.
Yeah, no, my favorite was that little GIF you sent me where there was a super fan with a Sting mask who suddenly like punched a wrestler out, and they takes off his Sting mask and it's just Sting underneath. It's right, like, yes,
so that's just hiding in plain sight. Like, it's hilarious.
That's the funniest thing.
But like,
you know what's really great is that Bryan Cranston literally like did that same kind of thing like at Comic-Con like 2015 or 2016 or something. He just went around Comic-Con wearing a Walter White mask, so it's his own face. Right. Nobody knew it was him.
I do want to mention that that reverse Royal Rumble was actually, that sounded like more of a King of the Hill match.
Mm.
So that's, I think, a TNA match, and I think they also did King of the Hill. But they've also had like King of the Mountain, which is like a reverse ladder match. Like, this is their staple. They try to position themselves as distinct from WWF because they are the #2 wrestling company in America. Now they're Canadian based, but they're still.
No,
they still.
I'm wait for after all this kind of game moves. I'm waiting for Capture the Flag.
Yeah, well, I mean, they have ladder matches. That's the point, to like climb the. So they do have flag. They do
get the briefcase at the top.
No, actually, no, that's not capture. Capture the flag would require 2 teams and two rings, and like going to the other rings and taking the flag and bringing it back to your own base.
Yeah, I recognize like the FPS style gameplay.
I mean, the closest I can think of is like the money in the briefcase.
So again, TNA tried to do the money in the bank, but stupidly. Where they hung 4 briefcases off instead of 1, and like 3 of them contained shots for the different titles, and 1 of them got you fired.
What?
And so it's like, who would ever agree to participate in a match where you had a 25% chance of getting fired? Like, why is that worth a #1? I guess if you're really desperate and like you could, that storyline takes a lot of work to set up. Where you have literally 4 teams.
You've been losing and losing and losing, so this is your one shot.
But you can't do that as a scheduled event because the drama has to be real, right? That's the problem with having a Hell in a Cell pay-per-view too, because the Hell in a Cell match is supposed to be reserved for the deepest of blood feuds, where you need this Hell in a Cell match to like force these 2 combatants, you know, who are sick to death of each other to like duel to the death, basically. And so to have it every year basically means that you lose that dramatic tension, because you know that they're going to try to build a storyline artificially, to fill the cell. And oftentimes they'll have more than one cell match in the pay-per-view, which means that now you have to do it twice. And in the case of the women's match, you have to do it 3 times. So that's the one thing that I'd like to see them, like, not that I expect them to really succeed, because the WWF is notorious for beating dead horses into the grounds, of course, for the sake of ratings, for the sake of short-term ratings. But I hope that they do something to treat the women's Rumble as equal or nearly equal to the men's Rumble, while not giving the audience like absolute fatigue having to sit through 2 Royal Rumble matches in a 4-hour pay-per-view. And so we'll see. I like the. I mean, I guess it spoils a bit of the surprise, assuming that Ronda Rousey is going to be the big surprise. But we'll see. So that's our segment on the Royal Rumble. Otherwise, so Dracologist, I heard you had another topic that you had requested to be on this podcast to discuss with me. So I'd be happy to hear it.
I didn't want it to bring up that much. I thought we want to speak about behind the scenes, but. There was this little hoopla about Wizards of the Coast in Magic the Gathering circles. Mm-hmm. Mr. Stompy, would you like to voice your thoughts?
Yeah, so generally speaking, without getting too much into the details, there was a significant controversy that necessitated a significant action on the part of Wizards of the Coast involving a large YouTube channel, a large content creator who produced Magic the Gathering videos and actually used to be the #1 most subscribed Magic the Gathering related channel on YouTube, posted some videos who were critical of a Magic the Gathering cosplayer, and so at some point shortly after that, she announced that she was quitting Magic the Gathering cosplay, partially to basically to focus on school, I believe. But on her way out, commented that she had received a substantial amount of harassment from the fan base of this Magic the Gathering content creator.
As far as I know, she didn't mention she is leaving because she's off school. That's
okay.
The stinker.
Okay.
Yeah,
well,
I think that information came out later.
She implied that it was largely because of him. And his fans. And shortly thereafter, a number of other content creators had mentioned that that basically anytime this guy launched a YouTube video talking about them, they would receive the usual spate of like negative attention and death threats that we've come to expect like on the internet anytime someone gets called out. So this guy, I'm not going to call him out specifically because the opposite is also true. Like anytime you name, like this guy also received a substantial number of death threats because a lot of people just don't care. You know, they have no personal attachment to like any type of justice. They just want to be, you know, personally satisfied. And so he also received a substantial number of death threats from people who purport to be progressive but really just want to get their jollies in on the internet.
Yeah, you could tell they're progressive because they're sending death threats on the internet, right?
Yeah, exactly. So
very progressive thing to do.
So it doesn't really
Could you get your dopamine dose somewhere else?
Yeah. Not that our audience is large enough that it would really like that. You know, all like 100 people who listen to this podcast are all gonna like dogpile on this guy's Twitter. But
the thing with that though is like I've seen something similar from Jim Sterling, like the video game reviewer. Like there was one person that he was talking about on his channel, and that person, I guess it was some developer or something. Apparently that person was like really shitty or whatever. But then his fan base went and like attacked that person, and Jim Sterling's like, what the hell are you doing? Like I was saying this guy's game sucked, or like what, I forgot what the context was. I wasn't saying for you to go and be assholes to him on the internet. Like
I think I know you.
I did not sanction this. Yeah.
So to be fair, one of the people who was targeted by this guy basically made a 20-minute video, which was literally nothing but screenshots of this guy's tweets and like replays of his videos. And I will say that he is like very blatantly, like extremely racist, like very misogynistic. He's not a good guy, but like there's the whole video, like the video literally starts with like, this guy who is really awful, do not send him death threats. And it's like nothing makes people want to do something more than telling them not to do it, right? So there are definitely like I at the end of the day, it boils down to like, what is the proper way to handle, toxicity and harassment in the gaming space. And while like, so for example, on Something Awful, they solved this problem, not really solved it, first off by putting up a small paywall, and secondly by creating basically a cesspool forum where people can post whatever they want, and everything is self-contained there, so people get it out of their system, and exactly who all the really awful people are who are like blatantly racist and sexist because they're just open about it. And as opposed to some place like 4chan or on /B all the comments are anonymous, you have to attach, your credit card information to your posts. So, like there's always accountability, if you're significantly transgressive. So like the consequence of this was that this guy got banned for life. And there was some ancillary fallout that like a bunch of his best friends in the community got banned for like 18 months. And it was also exposed that another content creator who previously was best known for defending Hitler on Twitch after reading Mein Kampf had opened a shitposting Facebook group for Magic, and some of his community members had posted some pictures of female Magic the Gathering content creators, including some of whom were also open trans women, and they had like a draft, and it was basically an invitation for all the men who were shitposting in that group to make fun of the appearances of the trans women, to label them traps, as is common on the internet, and to talk about their desire to have sex with attractive female content creators, basically. And all the people who were visibly posting in that group got banned for a year, and the guy who created the group got banned for 18 months. So that was more or less the fallout of that whole scenario, and it was followed up by a number of actions taken by Wizards of the Coast, where at the World Magic Championship that year, they had all the teams representing the country. The countries who were invited that year, like they created a video to broadcast to talk about inclusivity and how everybody was welcome in Magic the Gathering, and they've like had some initiatives where they have these like signs, these like ground rules that encourage local game stores to watch out for this kind of behavior, and I think it's an interesting take because of the game companies I'm aware of, Wizards of the Coast is somewhat more progressive in terms of promoting inclusivity in a positive way, not necessarily by taking, like, it's actually quite rare for somebody to be banned. The list of people who have been banned for any amount of time, I think it's like 150 or so. Like, it's very rare for somebody to get banned for any reason, no matter how, like, usually these lifetime bans are for actual, like, physical assault, or, like money laundering, or, like, theft, or, because there are, like, people who run theft rings. So it's quite rare so it's quite rare for people to be banned from Magic the Gathering tournaments. This was a special case, where this guy received a lifetime ban. But in general,
irrevocably.
Well, I wouldn't say irrevocably. I can't imagine what he would do to redeem himself, and I don't think he's particularly interested in it. Just like based on the tenor of his comments following his ban. But I think it's interesting to see how the community has grown up in the face of the positive elements that like Wizards has taken to promote inclusivity. I noticed that in the last few years, for example, while they haven't really openly promoted it, like one of the legendary characters in a recent set was a trans woman. One of them is neurodivergent. One of the planeswalkers was like openly neurodivergent. And
interesting.
They don't. You would never know it really. You would usually not know it. I mean, there's also there's a pair of rulers from their plane based on ancient Greece who, in a throwaway line on some flavor text, were implied to be gay, and they got their own legendary card in a release, in a pre-constructed deck based on what's called like group hug gameplay, which is a style of multiplayer gameplay where you build your deck around making everybody else in the multiplayer game better off. So they've very slowly been seeding the community with these very positive messages, as opposed to very rarely taking these very heavy-handed negative actions to punish people who they consider to be toxic. And the message that they've been sending, they promote positivity. They tell you that if someone says something that you disagree with, then you should take the time to talk to them about it, and not to assume that they mean badly. You could have an opportunity to change someone's mind and possibly even make a new friend. Of course, like there are some people who are really just so deep into it that a single conversation isn't going to change their mind. And in that case, yeah, like I think they're encouraging local game stores to try to figure out how to deal with that on their own. And and in that case, yes, I would say that they've been happy to hand down some bans. But I think that's extremely rare, and like extremely special case by case handling. And what I'm happy about is I compared this to something that happened a few years ago, which was that a player who had placed in the top 8 of a major tournament, like one of the largest tournaments of the year, it turned out that he was a registered sex offender and a convicted, I want to say convicted rapist, but he actually pled guilty to sexual assault. And so after this story came out, Wizards of the Coast decided to buy him out of Magic. Their lawyers contacted him, they purchased his entire Magic the Gathering online collection, and they came to an agreement by which he would no longer desire to play Magic, and they gave him this kind of like rubber stamp lifetime ban, although it was
like severance package almost.
Basically a severance package to play Magic. And the community at the time was infuriated. So Mark Rosewater, the lead designer, published statistics saying that 38% of Magic players, based on their focus group data, were female or female identifying, and only like 4 or 5% of the participants in high-level tournaments fit that same criteria. So clearly there was some mechanism, and I don't want to argue too much about what that mechanism is because it's an extremely hotly debated topic. It's beyond the purview of this podcast. There's obviously some mechanism which is forcing these women out of the game before they get to high-level play, even though many of them aspire to be high-level players. And in fact, a lot of those high-level players have been hired by Wizards of the Coast to do development. So, which is good because it means that the in-house development team has pretty solid representation. It's pretty close to 50-50 men and women. But it also means that like anytime a woman gets to a high level of the Pro Tour, she gets hired away to work for Wizards, and then she's not visible in the public game space anymore.
A little ironic.
Yeah, so again, it's a hard balance to make, but it's a long-term investment that they hope will pay off. And it's just good business, if all of these women are picking up the game casually and, could be long-term investments, could, be interested in playing the game long-term, but something is forcing them out, then it's just good business to get rid of that, And, so the community responded. They didn't believe these statistics. If you go on Reddit or on any of the major discussion sites, all the top voted comments implied that they thought that Wizards was pulling these numbers out of their ass. Because all these guys go to the local game stores and they're all guys. And it's like, of course they're all guys. Like, probably you guys are part of the problem, somehow, in some fashion. I shouldn't say that because I'm sure some of it is incidental. But certainly it would be nice to see people at least have a little bit of, self-awareness as to whether or not you might be part of the problem. And at the time, you never really saw that. In fact, commonly people complained like this guy got bought out of Wizards. You know, he got banned for life. You know, what's the objective criteria for Wizards banning a guy for life? And it turns out like it's actually really rare for a guy to be banned for life. You actually have to, generally speaking, have to commit a really serious crime for that to happen. So like,
yeah, I was about to say being pleading guilty to sexual assault's kind of a high bar, buddy. Like, I don't know if you have to worry too much about that, or at least I hope you don't.
Like, do you have a pending hearing? Like, are you about to be indicted for like a major felony?
Like, oh, they're just banning anybody now? Like, well, registered sex offender, sure.
So,
like, what do you?
It's a separate discussion in that case, and I think it's still very interesting to say, like, do you think that our justice system isn't necessarily, punitive? But that's way beyond the purview of like whether or not you're welcome at your local game store,
Mm-hmm.
and like a higher level discussion that gets far more political than Magic generally tries to be. So like the fact that all these guys came out, all these predominantly male Magic players came out to defend like this guy who didn't even really get banned, came to a mutual agreement to exit the game. And actually, like, they called for the guy who found out that he was a convicted sex offender to also be banned for the game for basically doing nothing but propagate publicly available information that this guy is really supposed to legally obligated, to tell us anyway, most of the time, like for any like serious business engagement, and that would have come out. They agreed that he was going to be banned because he was making this place unsafe for convicted sex offenders who are trying to avoid recidivism by picking up a hobby. And it's like, no, not really. It's just this one guy.
Yeah.
And like we never heard a peep ever since then. The guy who whistle blew basically like deleted his online presence because he was receiving harassment for like a really long time. And I don't even know what happened to him after that. He was a pretty high profile content creator for one of the major Magic the Gathering websites, and he more or less retired after that. So I can't imagine. I mean, it turned out he's actually like he worked for political campaigns in the past, and so he was used to this kind of thing. Like he used to be a muckraker basically. So I don't know. Maybe it's for the best. But so to see the response to what happened with this most recent controversy where people were at the so when we talk about like the silence breakers and that whole movement, at least on the American side, we don't necessarily mean that like people need to be put in jail at the slightest accusation, or that people need to go screeching for HR at like every little comment. It just means that we take these complaints seriously, and in this case they were found to be extremely credible and did a tremendous amount of harm to the Magic the Gathering community. By most estimates, like including by the measure of at least the American community itself, enough that most of the top-level pros, felt it reasonable to take action. They actually signed a letter of mutual support saying that if you see this kind of behavior at a Magic tournament, you're welcome to come find us. And I thought that was a nice gesture. It was largely performative because the judges at a Magic the Gathering tournament are already supposed to fulfill that function. And in fact, at the same time, like a couple of Magic the Gathering judges actually resigned because they confessed to committing sexual harassment. Like using, so the Me Too movements, it filtered all the way down to the level of Magic the Gathering judge.
I know. I mean, it's useful because, like, I think one of the major problems is that until these kinds of movements really started, like, this stuff was downplayed like crazy. And even if it did come out that no, this person beyond a doubt did something terrible, a lot of the kind of hand-wavy defense was like, I mean, I don't know about the Magic community specifically, but like, but he's such a great player though. Like the most obvious go-to example in recent American history would be Harvey Weinstein. It's like, but do you see how many good movies he's made? And it's like, yeah, well, he's a fucking like rapist. Like that's not, or if not, then at least serial sexual harasser. It's like, I don't care how good his movies were. Like we don't tolerate crimes, or at least we shouldn't. And not to mention, I'm starting to stray here from Magic the Gathering, but like there's been comments of like, oh man, but if you cut off such and such movie producer or such and such comedian or such and such actor, like think of all the roles they're not going to do or the movies they're not going to do. And it's like, well, yeah, but meanwhile, think about the way more, women who have been downplayed and have also not gotten into those positions 30 years ago. Like, how much stuff have we already missed as a result of this? Quit your whining.
Right. So, in some extent, this was kind of a perfect storm that this little controversy boiled up. Like, at the same time, there was a nationwide movement to, suddenly start believing women, basically.
Yeah,
at least in America. Like, I was curious.
It turns out every woman in the entire country at the same time, we're not all lying, It's like unbelievable.
So, it's like, if this guy didn't get banned for life, if they chose some other means of, if they bought him out like they did with the other guy, like, I wouldn't be that upset about it. If he continued to go to his local game store, I don't really care. It's not really my problem. What they did to him, so in this case, I think it's reasonable to make an example out of this guy because you want to make it poisonous to, like, associate with him. It's kind of like
that's the thing. Like, for being a dick on the internet, he got all that, but like it has to be somebody. Like it was gonna happen to somebody.
I wouldn't really support like banning. I wouldn't certainly support banning like literally everybody who posted a nasty tweet. That doesn't really make sense. But you should openly discourage
but like
that.
You got to show at least that you're serious. It's unfortunate that like it's gonna be somebody.
But that's not the core of the experience. The core of the experience is positive reinforcement of inclusive and constructive behavior, because we all just want to play a game, like
same thing with video games.
So that's why this topic is interesting to me, because it's
like how many women aren't using headsets online because like they don't want to put up with this shit,
or anybody. Like, I don't play online games. Like, I don't like face this on a day-to-day basis. I don't face sexism. I work at a tech company. I've never like faced an accusation of sexism. I've never like dealt with this kind of stuff. It's totally outside my
realm of expertise.
My realm of expertise. Yeah. But like, even I don't play online games because I just don't want to deal with people who play them. Like,
yeah. There you go.
Yeah, and like that's on top of.
And that's the thing though. Like for me, it's just like a logistical thing. Like, I don't feel like dealing with people. Like I'm not in a situation where I'm genuinely like nervous about the prospect of going online. Like, oh boy, what am I going to be facing today? Like, and there are lots of people who have to deal with that anytime.
Like, yeah, like, so there's an inflection point, and I've seen it. I've some of the content creators that my wife listens to have put it as like, we're at the stage where the internet is still. You're at the stage where the internet is still nice to you. Like, for the most part, people are very sincere when they post on your videos. People are nice, and they come onto the podcast and they have conversations with us about Steam Greenlight games, and
just wait until I get millions of subscribers, and then it all comes in. Yeah.
So like, it's an interesting problem to try to solve, and like, what I want to take away from it is the most important thing that Wizards did is that they are not particularly heavy-handed in most cases, but they are very positive. And like, at the end of the day, when you deal with this kind of stuff, you're dealing with people who want very like Dracologist said, dopamine reactions, the fastest electric path in your brain to a dopamine reaction, which means that like stuff that requires community building, that goes against like your personal programming and your personal satisfaction, like on either side, no matter like, it's an inherently apolitical phenomenon that like people want really satisfying answers to difficult questions because it means they don't have to think about it.
But also it's just the internet. Like, things are just faster now. Like, on social media, like, hey guys, how are you doing today? And I get like 3 likes. I'm like, yes.
Yeah.
So like, it's all about that quick shot.
Sure, but like even if you're trying to build a positive community, it's very satisfying to punish someone and ban someone and complain to the mods and get them kicked off the internet and downvote them on Reddit and go to Twitter and give them dislikes and give them angry reacts on Facebook. Yeah. Like,
it's a basic vigilante behavior. It's like, yes, I did something good. Yes, but good in what sense?
Yeah. But like,
not to mention, especially on places like, not to mention, especially on Twitter, outside of blocking somebody, you could also mute them, so they can still read your stuff and post to you, but you can't ever see them. So if somebody has muted me, for example, it doesn't tell me that because it defeats the purpose. But like if I have been muted and I'm like, oh man, I really hate this person. Hey person, you suck. Like I'm straight up screaming into the void. They couldn't see my post if they wanted to, and I'll be like, yes, I accomplished something. It's like I really haven't.
So yeah, that's why I brought up the something awful example, because it sort of exposes all the trash. You know, like it allows people to get that out of your system, but you know exactly who you shouldn't be interacting with, and like how to handle this. Again, like that's why I don't want to highlight the ban. I want to highlight the difficult work that it takes to build a good community. You know, like Lotus, you've been working on your YouTube community, like your content creation community, for years. You know, like you.
I guess to a degree you could say that, but like honestly, I don't know. Like for the very vast majority, I think I've just attracted nice people. Like I've never come in and been like, okay, let's see how I can craft my community. Like I haven't really been doing that.
But that's the point. Like you're very deliberate naturally, you know, right? You don't like posts on Facebook ever. You barely share things on Facebook without posting a response. You know, you put a lot of effort into everything that you make. You post a lot of content. You maintain a consistent upload schedule. You are very cautious with your language and your subject matter. You know, you try.
That's true.
That's part of the reason why.
Except for the podcast.
That's part of the reason. Well, that's part of the reason why we very rarely get political on the podcast, is because we want to expose ourselves to opposing viewpoints.
Political,
and
but I'm a little more willing to have crude language on the podcast.
Well, you know, crude language is crude language. Like
yeah,
whatever,
it's not that big of a deal.
Like just no, just like shut the fuck up.
Yeah, exactly. I'm much more willing to say that on the podcast than like in a Let's Plays, for example.
Well, yeah,
for whatever reason, I don't even know why.
It's also that like, you know, you have an international audience, and these things mean like different things. Like there's different standards.
Well,
for language.
Honestly, I mean, that's true, but I think part of it is that with the Let's Plays, I'm by myself, and everything I do is what I do. But with the podcast, I'm talking to my friends, and I have a different dynamic, like, with my friends. I'm a little more laid back, so I'm more willing to say, like, can you believe this fucking thing? And, you know, et cetera, et cetera.
It's also
so
like,
I'm more willing to let it slip.
It's also, like, a really simple case that, like, a lot of your podcast viewers aren't Americans, and, like, I really only know about American politics, so we wouldn't talk about politics for the most part, because it just isn't interesting, aside from, like, whether or not that Trump is going to launch a nuclear missile, or, you know, or Obama's going to launch a drone strike or some shit. Like, that's the thing. Like that's really.
Oh, please.
I mean, we do have a potential access to all matter of Hungarian politics, I suppose, for this particular week.
So yeah, I mean, like, I guess I was a little bit curious about that, because I know that there's a wide like response from the international MTG community to like come together in solidarity and you know, back Wizards of the Coast in trying to maintain like a positive community. So when you brought this up, Dracologist, it's kind of curious if you had any like perspective on this. Now that I've like soapbox for like 25 minutes on this.
Yeah, that was the funniest thing. Dracologist, you had a topic. You want to talk about it? Sure, I'll do another 25 minutes.
Well, that's why I'm here. That's why they don't. That's why they pay me $0 to be on this podcast. So Dracologist, I mean, do you have any thoughts? I know that I basically took up all the time, but...
I do not. Well, I'm just thinking that you said you encourage positivity, and my thing is that positivity is not immediately sending people to the chopping block.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And even after that guy was basically hammered constantly with like basically was I wouldn't say death threats, but basically was told off in various rather juicy ways.
So
people
I don't
people were
I want to be fair about the timeline here. Like, this has been a slow developing thing for years now. Like, this guy used to get preview cards for new sets, and then like over time, like, it's been a very slow process. Like, for example, they stopped sending him preview cards basically, but they didn't really do very much to his channel otherwise, and didn't do any punitive action. Like, this has been going on for a very long time. Like,
I actually didn't know that, because all the context I had was he was a jerk on the internet, and like boom, everything's gone.
Like, this has been going on for literal years.
Okay. Now, actually, no. Speaking of going on for years, though, like regarding positive and negative reinforcement is often a lot harder to do, because,
of course,
you know, negative reinforcement, you could be like, hey, that thing, don't do that thing. Like, so easy. I've isolated the problem. But the issue with negative reinforcement, though, is that it's mainly good for the very short term, and progressively less effective if you keep doing it over the long term, because, you know, one of humans, well, really most living things, like, greatest attributes is being able to adapt to their surroundings. So you can become just as you can, like, you know, get Dracologist, I mentioned the dopamine addiction, or not addiction, but dopamine shot. Like, just as you can get kind of, you could level out with a drug, for example, so you need more of it to get any kind of high. Mm-hmm. The same thing can happen to negative reinforcement. If all you do is yell at me, then I'm eventually going to learn to just tune you out. And this is the case with a lot of like workplace environments. It's difficult to get like a raise or whatever. It's more about like maintaining the status quo, where like just don't fall out of line and you'll be good. And it's like, that's not an environment I really want to be part of, where I must always be afraid of messing up. I would rather have some example to look up to. Like, I mean, I'm a teacher, so it's easy for me to fall into these analogies, but in the classroom, instead of saying like, oh man, I have a problem with this student or these students, you guys had better stop that, because now you're singling them out in front of a class, and that freaking sucks for anybody. Instead, you know, I can see this working better with elementary school kids, but it can work at all ages, theoretically. Just like if you see a problem, you could just go like, hey, you see how good these other students are being, and like have some minor degree of reward, or at like if there's something that actually calls for reward. Mm-hmm. Like my sister-in-law teaches the 3rd grade, for example, and one thing she makes damn sure about is to only reward things that are worthy of rewards. So for example, if somebody does their homework, if they show up to class on time, they're sitting in their desks, good for you, but that's not going to get a reward. That should be the status fucking quo, right? You know, like, so make sure that we do that. But if you do something above and beyond, like, oh, what a surprise, well, thank you for that. But like, that does, again, long run, it requires effort, but that does work better than negative reinforcement. Well, all you're going to do, you might quash the problem, the immediate problem, but you're going to potentially develop or have the student develop a resentment against you. And like, you're not supposed to be the bad guy. You're living with this person for like 3/4 of a year, mm-hmm. and you're supposed to be like having this working relationship. So like, positive reinforcement, even from a company-wide scale, like that's got to be like a really deliberate thing to do, but it should pay in dividends if you're patient.
Yep.
Diligence is rewarding. What I wanted to say, I do want like between negative response, positive response can be enough to, like, if you want, just tell someone who has been acting out, like, please don't, or dude, cut it out. Mm-hmm. This is upsetting some people a little bit.
Yeah.
Could you tone it down just a little bit?
Yeah, and like, that comes back to the Jim Sterling thing.
Because
Well, yeah, well, that comes back to the Jim Sterling thing. It's like, it's one thing to be like, hey, you're a jerk, like that, like, not that kind of thing, but like when a major swath of his fan base was just like personally attacking somebody in their social media, it's like, guys, the hell is wrong with you? Like, you know better than that. I thought you were adults. Yeah.
Actually, the problem with was that the attack went against not the person who was the bad person, but some sort of, I don't know, employer or something, some sort of agent or something.
Yeah, they want to have some like ancillary person, but like you shouldn't be doing that anyway. So like, even if you got the right person, yes. It's like try to be better than that. Like, I thought they were the bad guy. Like, you know what it makes me think of? I mean, you see this in movies, but even just in real life, you know, let's say there's a horrible serial killer, right? The killer's been finally caught, and he's going to get put on death row, or, you know, in older days, he's going to get publicly executed. Finally, we're going to get rid of this horrible person who's been a blight on our society. But what do you see when this happens? Like, the whole town comes out, and they're calling for blood, and they're actually acting less civilly than the actual murderer may have been when he was murdering. And it's like, what the fuck are we even looking at right now? Like, I thought you were supposed to be better than this person. That's why he's on death row and you're not. What am I looking at? It's a bunch of, like, rabid animals right now.
This is called mob mentality.
Mm-hmm. No, it is, but it's like, again, like, who's the real animal here? Like, the guy actually did the crime. I'm not going to deny that. But, like, why are you acting like wild dogs? It's just like, it's disgraceful behavior. Mm-hmm. So like, don't be worse than the person that you yourself consider to be the bad guy.
Yeah. Well,
because humans are still animals at some point.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that is true, but like, you'd think that after like thousands of years of
no,
becoming
no.
socialized, we would
no,
like
don't dream the dream.
So like this is an important thing to think about, and like it's part of the issue with like pay violence into violence, so to speak, is that so when we're talking about these kinds of issues, and you like take your anger out, someone's being like sexist or whatever, and you take your anger out on them, if they feel like you're an equivalent, like if like that's a power dynamic, where some guy is expressing like his power in society like over a woman. That's usually what promotes misogyny, either because like there's some like social context that like leads him to believe that he can like be that way or whatever, or like his friends permit him to do that. But when you call that behavior out, if like I go out somewhere and call that behavior out and say, oh, you shouldn't do that to women, and like I don't actually change his mind, I just make him feel really bad. Like he's a lot of the time, those people, they're not gonna argue with me. They might not even say anything. They might even agree with me at the time, but at the same time, they might take it out on someone weaker than them if they really feel bad about it. And so like one example that I can think of is there was a study a while ago that says that people who believe that vaccines cause autism, which is like one of the biggest, like most problematic, scientific hoaxes of the last like 20 years. Telling people that, showing pictures of all the horrible diseases that their kids or like their friends' kids can get actually makes people more likely to believe. It just like makes people double down on their views. It's a process that like one theorist called compactification, where you have this like short circuit emotional response that leads you to ignore all evidence in favor of this like satisfying like idea that you shouldn't like vaccinate because the government's out to get you, and you see like a lot of facts that debunk that, and you just double down because it bothers you a lot and you can't stand it, so you want this, you need this like
go back to your comfort
you're addicted
zone.
to this dopamine high for like getting angry and fighting your cause and like getting all worked up.
What's funny is, I was actually thinking of something. Sorry, Dracologist, go ahead.
It was just something short that there is this little comic strip about like there is two booths. One has a massive line, the other has none. And so the massive line says comforting lies. The one that's nothing is the painful truth.
Right. Yeah, I've seen that before, and it's definitely accurate. So, but the other side of that study found was that showing people like healthy kids, as opposed to showing them diseased kids, actually did a better job of convincing people of like opening people's minds that to the idea, as opposed to this negative reinforcement.
No, I was actually going to come from a completely different direction, not for the vaccine thing with the doubling down, but I was actually thinking of a different way that would bring about people doubling down, but this is more of a my opinion, your opinion kind of thing, rather than like attempting to argue facts versus not. Like, I just imagine like if you ever have a sort of stereotype of the way a particular group of people is, this doesn't really work for the vaccines cause autism versus not, but like, I don't know, if you have like some sort of regional stereotype or like political spectrum type of stereotype, like, oh, those Republicans, oh, those Democrats, blah, blah, blah. What I've found is that like, if you argue against those people, because I just know for a fact how right I am, how could anybody possibly be wrong? Clearly those people are stupid. And so, if you start arguing in that manner, then the person on the receiving end is going to be like, well, I knew it. I have actual proof right here that the opposite side is just a bunch of pretentious assholes who are being rude to me. Like, and so like just going at the opposite side in that way just kind of proves them right about people like you, that kind of thing.
Sure. Like you have to treat intelligent people like they're intelligent, even if they're being extremely stubborn.
Yeah.
So I saw an article a while ago that like the modern American left believes that they're all like the West Wing, which is it's that really famous scene where that gets posted a lot, where I think it's the whoever plays the president, some woman is on the show is talking about how like homosexuality is wrong in the Bible. This guy like lists off this litany of things that are also in the Bible, and it's like, are you wearing?
What about mixing clothes with fabrics and eating shellfish?
So people want to believe that that's how you solve like a political problem. You just like show somebody up and like own them,
you're
so
done.
to speak. And you see all these articles that are like, oh, this conservative got destroyed on Twitter.
I fucking hate clickbait so much.
Like,
but seriously though, like that really is a problem though. It hasn't even become about convincing the other person, which is why you'd think you'd have an argument in the first place. It's about winning. I got my points, like, and I've like even seen. I've done this to a degree myself, honestly, but like just Googling something real quick and just like I got my link here, read my long ass link. Like it's just like no one's doing that.
Yeah, I mean, people barely click the read more button on Facebook posts.
You right?
Yeah, teal deer, thanks.
Yeah, true.
Indeed. So that was.
I've never seen that before, but that's pretty clever. Teal deer, TLDR.
Yeah. So yeah, we've come a bit afield, but like I think I covered most of what I thought was like the lesson we should take away from like this issue in Magic the Gathering. Like the idea that like building a good community and welcoming more people into your community is quite difficult. Requires a lot of effort, and like it's effort that has to come from oftentimes up top. So like it comes from Wizards of the Coast, translates down to the local game store level, and then that has to translate to like local social like alphas, so to speak.
Yeah, and that's been a problem with, again, bringing up Weinstein. That's been a problem too. Like we can all be like, oh, I should treat my people like the people around me like nicely and equally and everything. It's like, yeah, but Hollywood still has systemic oppression that everyone knows about and nothing's being done about. So like only now are they finally starting to actually do something about it. So we might start to see changes.
Yeah. So I mean, not that we're in a position to like really comment on that, but I'm not really hopeful, but I'm interested. I'm engaged.
Yeah, at the very least, like at least certain people are being dealt with. I don't know if the system itself is going to just radically change or anytime soon, but like it has the potential to.
It is an interesting meteorological phenomenon, the shitstorm. It is, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Most definitely.
Yeah, and like I like the Magic products too, just because the characters are so interesting now. Like their backgrounds are sufficiently diverse that I'm like really invested in seeing who they're coming out with next, and like the writers they hire to do the storylines are usually really interesting. Like they try to do their subject material justice, and I appreciate the effort. Like so, I had this discussion with a friend of mine a while ago that people debate like Star Wars lore to death. Like people spend their entire lives debating this kind of stuff, and like
too bad the entire EU is just out of the window.
Do you think that George Lucas spends like literally every waking moment thinking about like his own Star Wars lore? Like probably not, but Mark Rosewater and like some of the guys who do lead design in Magic the Gathering probably do like literally wake up every morning and spend every second of every day, except for like time with their family, like thinking about Magic and how to make Magic a better game. And like how to bring it to more people, and how to provide not just a diverse experience in terms of like the people who come play the game, but also in terms of like the way the game plays, and to make each set have its own like distinct feel so that people get excited to come back to the game every 3 months. And that's part of like inclusivity. It makes the game better. It isn't just like putting different people on the cards. It's also like giving everything its own flavor.
Yeah, that's some of the most fun part of Magic to me is like the couple lines of flavor text, because they really don't mean too much by themselves unless it's a rare self-contained card like I don't know, like the Lurgoy from Ice Age, where the flavor text is just like, this thing is scary, deal with it. But like,
well, that's
when you see plot stuff in Weatherlight across the entire set, it adds up.
So actually, there's a storyline to Lurgoy too, because this pans across several cards. So Lurgoy, the flavor text on it is like Ach Hans, run, because it takes place in like
Lurgoy.
Scandinavia, and the woman who says it is Safi Eriksdotter. So and she got her,
that name's actually familiar.
She got her own card on Time Spiral, like, and
nice.
there's also
that's a long con too, because Ice Age was 1995 and Time Spiral was like 2000 something.
There's also a card. So there's a card in some later, I think it's Odyssey or something, where it called like the Revenant, and it's the flavor text is just like, oh no, not again, quoted Hans.
Yeah, I remember that.
and then there's a card in I think it's Unhinged called Ach Hans Run, and you're allowed to like just like, grab all the cards from outside your deck and put them all on the battlefield at the same time. And it's just like the art is like literally Hans standing there like peeing himself while he's being attacked by like literally every creature in the game. So like a lot of attention to detail goes into like every Magic card, and it shows. You have all these like little things that you can find all these like references.
Yeah,
and it doesn't.
Well, I mean, I've brought this up before, but again with Time Spiral, like an even older set is Fallen Empires. That was like 1994 or something, and like just the fact that Time Spiral has like a card, Sarpadian Empires Volume 8, or maybe it was 7, because like when Fallen Empires, you might have noticed in the flavor text they'll have random quotes and it'll be like Sarpadian Empires Volume 3, and if you get the whole set together, you'll see that there are 6 volumes, and then Time Spiral has Volume 7. Right. It's like, we're calling back to this.
It's
okay.
It's postscript. It's actually, so I know this really well because when you have to type in a card name on Magic Online, because it's in italics, which means that when you express it in like a string form, it's got quotes in plain text.
Yeah,
that's the only Magic card that if you express it in string form online, it has quotes on it. So it's actually first alphabetically on in the card list ahead of all the cards that begin with A.
Devon card.
Well, I don't remember what the current like first card alphabetically. I know that early on, so like some players when they have to play something that requires you to name a card and they're like irrevocably ahead such that they can't possibly lose, they'll type in like Abandon Hope because that's like one of the first cards alphabetically.
Oh sure,
like,
AB.
It's like it's like a victory lap, like to do that to your opponents, which is always like pretty funny. Yeah. But like Sarpadian Empires Volume 7 is always the first card that you see. So I'm like super. So like I see it all the time when I play Magic Online.
That's kind of funny.
Like this quote reminds me that there was a Hungarian similar trading card game called Cards of Power, where there was a look is not everything has to be very creative, but anyway, there was like always a quotation mark from a specified the unseen character that is like the the concept was that every time the quotations happened, it like some of this expedition member died because of that creature or event or building.
Oh jeez. Nice. So there's a similar character in Magic lore named Jaya Ballard, who's like just notorious for being for being like a pyromancer who just wants to set everything on fire. And so like all of her flavor text is on fire spells and they're all like hilarious. Nice. And she got her own card in Time Spiral, and I think she's getting another one. In a new set coming out soon. So like the fans really love her character. I think her most famous one is it's like of course you should fight fire with fire. You should fight everything with fire.
Nice.
And I like that one. Yeah.
That's pretty good.
So yeah. So that was 40 minutes on Magic the Gathering and sexism. So my soapbox is just about broken down. It's drenched in the tears of my enemies and starting to fall apart at the seams. So so I think that's our show for this week. Please remember to subscribe to the Corrective Consciousness YouTube and Soundcloud pages, where you can view our sister podcast and mourn for the loss of her family earlier on in this episode. While there, please give us thumbs up, likes, and 5-star ratings in iTunes. It helps us promote and spread awareness of the show, and any bit of encouragement keeps the show going, makes us feel good about ourselves, and positive reinforcement, as we said, is the way to go. You can also catch us.
Nicely done.
You can also catch us on Tuesday for Corrective Consciousness, the podcast about our lives in pop culture, just like this podcast. And finally, you can friend our usual host as Vice the Bold on Steam, PSN, Xbox Live, and Battle.net.com.
Yep. And Twitter.
And Twitter. And you can find me as OldManStompy right here on this podcast, and just listen to it. And
you've already found me.
Here I am.
Yeah. Whoa. And you can follow me on my YouTube channel, Lotus Prince. You can hit me up on Twitter at Lotus Prince. And finally, if you are interested in seeing my videos early, getting in on exclusive live streams, or even selecting upcoming games for me to Let's Play, then you might consider swapping. Great. Stopping by my Patreon page can be found at patreon.com/Lotus Prince.
You did a great job recovering. Positive re-encouragement.
Yeah. Whew. Why, thank you.
Thanks. That's a great ringtone. Or are you playing a music box?
It's a music box.
Oh. You can find Dracologist at that music box.
Yes.
Is that your new call sign? Can we decode that into Morse code and determine your Twitter handle?
You can try.
Spoiler alert. You can find him as Dracologist in places where he wants to be found. I didn't mean to spoil it.
Yes.
Yeah,
Steam,
pretty
Skype,
much.
Discord.
Okay.
Although Discord requires some sort of number code, so...
Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah,
I don't know why people want to find me. I'm not that interesting.
Well, we disagree. We've had you on like 3 times now.
You study and heal dragons.
But I'm coming to you guys because I find you guys interesting. I'm not sure that the center of
Whoa,
attention
that
is.
positive reinforcement.
Awesome. I feel great. I'm gonna go out and build a community.
Yeah.
So maybe Andrew says thanks for listening and something like that to indicate we've closed it out, and maybe I shouldn't read directly from the script. So I'll see you guys next week.
Until next time, everyone.
That's
Yeah, what is it, like 6 a.m. for you right now?
That's how I feel all the time.
7.
Oh, 7? Oh, good lord. We got to get off. All right, have a good night, everybody.
Cheers.